Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We have a fascinating stack of research today. We're looking at something that sits right at the intersection of entertainment, psychology, and honestly, social engineering. We're talking about serious games.
And before you tune out thinking this is just about, Math Blaster.
Or those terrible corporate compliance quizzes.
Yeah, where you just click next until it's over. Let me stop you. The source material we're covering today is a habilitation thesis by Julian Alvarez. We are specifically zeroing in on Chapter 7, which is basically a masterclass in the strategies of influence.
Right. This isn't about what serious games are. It's about how they work on your brain. The core question Alvarez is tackling in this chapter is actually really, really difficult.
It is.
How do you take play, which is supposed to be free, voluntary, and fun, and combine it with serious, which is all about utility, learning, and constraints, without, well, ruining both?
It's a paradox. If you make it too serious, it's just a boring lesson disguised as a game. He calls it chocolate-covered broccoli. But if you make it too fun, the player might just get lost in the game loop and miss the learning objective entirely. So, yeah, Chapter 7 is basically the manual for bridging that gap.
So we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about procedural rhetoric, how games can make arguments without words. We're going to look at a concept called the V effect, which suggests that breaking the fun might actually be the best way to learn.
Which is so counterintuitive.
And finally, we're going to map all of this to actual educational psychology to see why some games stick and others just fail.
It's a roadmap for hacking motivation, essentially.
Let's start with the persuasion piece. The source kicks off with something called advergames. This seems like the most obvious intersection of game and agenda.
It is. Advergames are a good baseline because the goal is so transparent. Buy this product.
Yeah.
But Alvarez points out that even here, it's not just about slapping a logo on a wall in a racing game. Designers use the basic atoms of the game, the avatar, the camera angle, the resources, as motivational levers.
Can you give me an example of how an avatar acts as a lever? I usually just think of it as the character I'm controlling to get from point A to B.
Okay, well, think about customization. If a brand lets you build an avatar that looks exactly like the cool version of yourself you aspire to be.
Right. Wearing their digital sneakers, driving their digital car.
Exactly. They aren't just showing you a product. They are allowing you to project yourself into a world where you already own that product. It creates an attachment before you've spent a dime.
That's subtle. It's psychological projection. But Alvarez moves quickly past that into a much more complex idea. Procedural rhetoric. This is a term from Ian Bogost, and it seems crucial here.
It is the cornerstone.
I love this term, but let's break it down. Rhetoric is usually about speech persuading someone with words, right? Oratory. Procedural implies a computer process. So are we talking about persuading someone with code?
Yes, that's exactly it. In a book or a lecture, I tell you an argument. I say, violence creates a cycle that is hard to escape. In a game, I can't just tell you that, or I break the spell. So instead, I make you play the argument. I set up rules and mechanics where the only logical outcome of your actions creates the realization I want you to have.
The source uses a very specific, somewhat controversial example to illustrate this.
Yeah.
A game called September 12th.
It's a classic in the field. And it's the perfect example because it completely subverts your expectations as a player.
So for anyone who hasn't seen it, the setup is this. It's a top-down view of a bustling Middle Eastern town, civilians walking around, and there are terrorists, you have a crosshair, you can shoot missiles.
It looks like a standard arcade shooter.
Exactly. Your brain sees the pattern immediately.
Yeah.
See bad guy, shoot bad guy, win game.
You enter the game with that gamer mindset. You want to win. You want to eliminate the threat.
But that's the trap, because the rhetoric here isn't about winning. When you fire the missile, there's a delay. The blast radius is huge. You aim for a terrorist, but you almost inevitably kill civilians nearby.
And here is the argument in the code. When a civilian dies, other civilians gather around the body, they mourn, and then they transform into terrorists.
So the more you shoot, the more enemies you create.
Precisely. The game never displays a text box saying violence begets violence. That would be weak.
It's on the nose.
Way too on the nose. Instead, it forces you to participate in the cycle. You try to win, you fail. You try harder, you fail worse. And eventually, the player realizes the only winning move is not to fire.
And that realization, that feeling of futility is the lesson.
That is procedural rhetoric. You internalize the argument because you enacted it yourself. It's much harder to argue against a conclusion you reached on your own than one someone shouted at you.
That makes perfect sense. But this brings up a conflict. Usually when we talk about games, we talk about immersion.
Correct. Flow.
We want to get lost in the world. We want to forget reality.
Mhm.
But Alvarez, in Chapter 7, introduces a section on distancing. He suggests that for a serious game to be effective, sometimes you have to intentionally break the immersion.
You have to slap the player in the face a little bit.
Why would a designer do that? Isn't that just bad design?
It really depends on the goal. If the goal is pure entertainment, yes, breaking immersion is a failure. But if the goal is education or critical thought, total immersion can actually be a problem.
How so?
When you are totally immersed, you are acting on instinct. You are reacting, not thinking. But for learning, you need the player to pause and reflect. Alvarez borrows a concept here from theater, specifically from Bertolt Brecht, called the V effect.
The Verfremdungs effect.
You've been practicing.
I have.
Yes. It translates to the distancing effect. Brecht didn't want his audience to get so swept up in the emotion of a play that they forgot the social commentary. He wanted them to remain aware that they were watching a performance so they could judge it critically.
So how does a video game do that? Because usually if a game reminds me I'm playing a game, it just feels like a glitch.
In a serious game, that glitch is a strategy. Let's go back to September 12th. That moment when you stop clicking, pull your hand off the mouse and think, wait, this system is rigged. What am I actually doing? That is the V effect. You have stepped out of the magic circle of the game and are looking at it as a system.
So the learning doesn't happen during the play. It happens in the gap between the play and the reflection.
Precisely. And to facilitate this, Alvarez talks about another technique called metalepsis.
Which sounds like a medical condition, but in narratology, it's about crossing boundaries, right?
Right. It's a transgression between levels. In a movie, it's breaking the fourth wall, an actor looking at the camera. In a game, it's when the game acknowledges the real world.
The source mentions Metal Gear Solid here. The villain, Psycho Mantis, reads your actual memory card and tells you what other games you've played.
It freaks people out. But why is that useful for learning? Because a serious game needs to transfer knowledge. If the game is a perfectly sealed bubble, the skills stay in the bubble.
I see.
Metalepsis pierces that bubble. It says, hey, you, sitting in that chair, this applies to your real life.
It forces the connection. It reminds you, this isn't just about saving the princess. This is about how you manage your budget or how you treat your coworkers.
Exactly. But there is a huge risk here. If you break the immersion too much, or if the game feels too preachy, the player re-engages their skepticism. They stop trusting the game.
This leads us to the next big pillar in Chapter 7, trust, or what the source calls ludic ethos.
This concept comes from Sebastian Genvo. We know ethos from rhetoric. It's the speaker's credibility.
Right. If I don't trust the speaker, I don't listen to the argument.
Ludic ethos is the credibility of the game itself.
But how does the game have credibility? Is it about graphics or...
Partly, but it's mostly about coherence and behavior. If I'm playing a flight simulator designed to train pilots, but the plane handles like a shopping cart, the game has zero ethos. I don't respect it, so I don't learn from it. I just dismiss it.
But Alvarez highlights that ludic ethos is subjective. It depends on who is playing.
Correct. A complex simulation might have high ethos for an engineer. They see all the data and say, yes, this is accurate.
Okay.
But for a casual player, it looks like a boring spreadsheet. They might dismiss it as not a real game. Their perception of the game's character is different.
So the designer has to convince the player that the game is worth their time and their trust.
And sometimes they do that by hijacking the ethos of an existing game. This is what Alvarez calls serious diverting, or détournement.
This was the Lego Batman example, right? This part confused me a bit. How do you turn Lego Batman into a serious game without hacking the code?
This is a fascinating case study in strategy versus design. So educators wanted to teach a complex system for classifying types of play called the EZAR system.
Okay.
Instead of building a boring educational tool from scratch, they used the commercial video game Lego Batman.
But Lego Batman isn't a serious game. It's a toy. It's for fun.
The code didn't change. The context changed. The assignment wasn't beat the Joker. The assignment was play this level and identify exactly which cognitive skills you're using at this specific moment.
That's brilliant. So they used the fun and the high production value of the commercial game to drive this serious analysis. They diverted the purpose.
Exactly. It proves you don't always need million-dollar budgets to build a simulation. Sometimes you just need to change the contract with the player. You change the rules of the activity, not the rules of the software.
Now, we've talked a lot about logic, arguments, and analysis. But what about feelings? The source distinguishes persuasive games from expressive games. What's the difference there?
Persuasive games, like September 12th, are trying to win an argument or prove a point. Expressive games are trying to transmit an emotion or a personal reality. They aren't arguing, they are sharing.
The example in the notes was Leave Oma, Dear Grandma.
Yes. It's a game where you just walk through the woods with your grandmother picking mushrooms.
No enemies, no high score, no time limit.
No. If you go into that game looking for a win state or procedural rhetoric, you're going to be frustrated. You might say it has low ludic ethos because it's not gamey enough.
Right.
But the goal is simply to feel the empathy, the calmness, and the specific relationship the creator had with their grandmother.
And for a serious game, that's a valid outcome.
Absolutely. Think about healthcare or therapy. Games like That Dragon, Cancer, or Leave Ama are used to teach empathy to medical professionals. You can't teach empathy with a multiple choice quiz.
No, you really can't.
You have to make someone feel it. The strategy there is emotional resonance, not procedural argument.
So we've covered the game side of things. Rhetoric, immersion, ethos, emotion. But Chapter 7 ends by trying to ground all of this in hard science. The source connects these game strategies to a guy named Roland Vio.
Right, and this is where the rubber meets the road. Vio is a heavy hitter in educational psychology, specifically regarding motivation. He studies why students drop out or why they engage.
And he developed a model of 10 conditions for motivation.
He did. And Alvarez basically takes these 10 conditions and says, look, game designers have been doing this accidentally for years.
It's almost a Rosetta Stone moment.
It really is. Alvarez maps the educational theory directly to game mechanics. It shows that good teaching and good game design are often using the same psychological levers, just with different names.
Let's look at a few of these matches, because I think this is where the engine room concept really clicks. Vio says a student needs perception of value. They have to know why they're doing something.
Yeah, if a student thinks a math problem is useless, they won't do it.
They check out.
And in games, Alvarez maps this to the V-effect and metalepsis strategies we talked about. By connecting the game to the real world, you provide that value. You're showing the player, this matters outside the screen.
Vio also lists challenge. An activity must be difficult but achievable.
In game design, that is flow. It's the Goldilocks zone. If a game is too hard, you quit out of anxiety. If it's too easy, you get bored. Good pedagogy and good game design both try to keep you in that narrow channel of engagement.
What about choice? Vio says learners need to feel like they're in control of their learning path.
We call that agency. If a player feels like they are just pressing a button to advance a movie, they tune out. They need to feel that their decisions impact the world.
Right.
The source actually connects this to empowerment.
There was one connection that I thought was particularly cool. Authenticity. Vio says the task should result in something real, not just a grade, but a product.
That's productive. And Alvarez links this to data games.
Like Fold It.
Exactly. In Fold It, players solve puzzles that actually represent protein folding structures. They are doing real biological research.
That is the ultimate authenticity. You aren't playing a scientist, you are a scientist.
And that is a massive motivational lever. Knowing that your play is actually helping to solve a disease, that keeps people engaged far longer than a leaderboard ever could. It satisfies that deep need for purpose.
So if we have all these strategies, ethos, flow, rhetoric, authenticity, does that mean we have a formula? Can I just check these boxes and build the perfect educational game that works for everyone?
No. And this is the final, critical variable the source discusses. You can build the perfect machine, but you have to know who's going to operate it.
The player.
Exactly. Alvarez brings in Umberto Eco's concept of the model reader, or in this context, the model player. Every game assumes a certain level of competence and interest from its audience.
The source mentions Marchesky's player profiles here. I feel like anyone who plays games knows this. You have your socializers and your achievers.
Right. So let's say you build a serious game based on Vio's condition of interaction. It's all about group work, chatting, collaboration. A socializer will love it. They will learn a lot. But an achiever, someone who just wants to master the skill, get the badge, and move on, might hate it.
They'd find it annoying.
They might find the social aspect distracting and inefficient. Their ludic ethos for that game goes way down. They disengage. They might actually learn less because the strategy doesn't match their motivational profile.
So the strategy isn't just make a game, it's make a specific game for a specific profile using a specific rhetoric.
It's an alignment problem. You need the game strategy, the pedagogical condition, and the user profile to all line up. When they do, you get that magic transfer of knowledge. When one is off, you just have a boring video game or a confusing lesson.
It's funny, we started this by saying serious games sound simple, just adding fun to learning. But looking at Chapter 7, it's actually incredibly fragile.
It's engineering, not magic. And it's engineering of the human mind, which is the hardest material to work with.
So if you had to distill this massive chapter down to one actionable insight for our listener, what would it be?
I think it's the realization that fun is not the primary metric for a serious game. Engagement is. And sometimes engagement means making the player uncomfortable.
With the V effect.
Exactly. Or forcing them to face a losing scenario like in September 12th. If you are designing for learning, or if you are trying to learn something yourself, you have to be brave enough to prioritize the lesson over the entertainment.
That ties back to that V effect idea that really stuck with me. We're living in a time where technology, VR, AR, the metaverse, is pushing for total seamless immersion.
Right. That's the commercial trend.
We want to be fully inside the digital world. We want the graphics so good we can't tell the difference. But Alvarez seems to be warning us, or at least offering a counterpoint. He's saying that if we want to actually grow as humans, we need to be able to step back.
Right. If the game is too perfect, we're just sleepwalking through it.
It's like the glitch, the break in the illusion, might be the only place where we are truly awake.
That's a profound thought. It's the only place where we can say, okay, I see the system now. How do I change it?
A little philosophical glitch to leave you with today. Thanks for popping the hood on this with us. I think we definitely proved there's a real engine in there.
My pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.